The Sand Wash Basin herd management area is 150,000 acres and home to Colorado's last great wild horse herds. On September 3rd, we returned to the roundup. This time, CBS News out of Denver was covering the scene, along with accomplished film director Ashley Avis and her crew. As we were waiting for the choppers to fly, we listened in on the interviews the other journalists were conducting with BLM officials.
I'm not going to speak to the governor's letter or anything of that nature.
They brought attention to the governor of Colorado, Jared Polis, who had written a very thoughtful letter, and he even spoke with Secretary of the Interior, Deb Haaland, asking that the so-called emergency roundup be postponed 6 months in order to get better estimates of wild horses on the range, forage conditions, and expressed concerns for how quickly BLM was removing wild horses without further science. Senator Joe Neguse sent a strong letter as well, along with two of the nation's top conservation groups, Western Watersheds and the Sierra Club. Ashley Avis and her crew were asking good questions as well. Right on cue, a BLM official would spout off their completely false narrative that horses are not indigenous to North America. They would make claims that there was not enough forage, yet at the same time, they would allow hundreds of sheep to graze on the land that is primarily designated for wild horses. The roundup would continue as scheduled. A lull came over the operations. As we waited an hour for one of the choppers to reappear, we heard it drawing closer, and as it hovered over the ridgeline, we could see its target. This time, it was chasing down one single horse. Why waste the fuel, time, and money of everyone involved that day to gather a single horse? As we were packing up to leave, I asked two of the BLM officials about plans for rare earth mining, to which the official replied, "Rare earth is rare," and went on to say there were no current plans for mining. I then asked about the oil shale development, since the Craig, Colorado area has one of the largest oil shale deposits in America. BLM officials went on to say there were no plans for oil or gas development in the area. As we were escorted from the trap site to the holding pens, the BLM officials, aware or not, drove us right through countless frac sites and massive oil and gas development in the herd management area. Curious, were they showing their hand, or simply oblivious to the contradictory statements they made not an hour earlier? Once again, it seems that there is a cover-up unfolding in wild horse country. As we continued driving, we encountered several majestic bands of wild horses running alongside us and crossing the road in front of our car. As you can see, these wild horses are incredibly fit, strong, and healthy. Yet, BLM kept saying over and over, this is an emergency gather because the horses will starve. No signs of starvation or dehydration. The spirit of the Sand Wash wild horses is amazing. Through survival of the fittest, these wild horses have evolved into some of the toughest, intelligent, and well-adapted horses in America. When we arrived at the holding pens, it was a morbid view of beautiful wild creatures imprisoned in an industrial operation carried out by corrupt government contractors.
These horses are not in good shape out here. You run them hard for a quarter mile, they're done for, it's over. So you got to drive them like cattle, you can't run them.
criminally convicted Dave Couture still receives millions of dollars in federal contracts. In 2010, Dave Couture's company led the extremely brutal Calico Complex Winter Roundup, in which over 100 wild horses perished and hundreds more suffered terribly. Wild horse advocate Mustang Meg raised important points of how the horses were being crowded together here and in long-term holding facilities, such as Canyon City.
All these new foals have the possibility of dying of strangles because you're just piling and piling and piling over.
Responsibility to place them into good homes. You're absolutely right about that.
Then why do you allow kill buyers to buy them?
We don't.
Yes, you do.
We don't allow kill buyers.
Yes, you do.
They can be bought from other people who have titled their animals, and then they can sell their animals to kill buyers for sure. That's completely illegal.
We were instructed later that night to meet at 5 a.m. the next morning to be escorted to the roundup site. They seemingly gave the 5 a.m. call time to discourage people from attending the roundup, as we all waited for 3 hours in the cold of dawn through freezing temps, watching the contractors set up their traps. I was overjoyed to see how many journalists and activists had shown up to cover the story. Back in 2003, when I covered my first BLM roundup, I was the only civilian on the scene, surrounded by BLM officials and contractors. No one else was there to tell the true story. I asked Mustang Meg to tell us more about the Sand Wash Basin horses. Please tell us your personal view on this.
Personal view is they're running them hard, they're running them far, they're running them off cliffs and through draws. When there's newborns there, they're flying low and hard at these horses. He stayed above a newborn for a long time. I mean, there's been so many newborns. I watched a newborn get trampled inside there. There's been fighting. There's 200 horses in that corral. There's way too many. The big herd that came from that way probably came from the far side of the basin, because a couple of the horses that we saw come in, we know where they were, and they were at the far side, almost to Bears Ears. So they ran them from Bears Ears all the way to here.
How far would you say that is?
Oh, at least 10 miles. Wow. They can run them 10 miles, and they're going to say, oh, it was 9 point. I've heard them say, it's 9.9. Honestly, either they have a contract already for somebody coming in here. Somebody's coming in here. More sheep are going to come in. With 100 horses out here, they say they're going to leave 163. How are they going to know that? How are they going to know there's 163 out here? They're not going to count. Actually, 113, because they're releasing 50. So they're going to zero this entire area is going to be zeroed out.
The helicopters stormed into the sky like an Afghanistan operation. Our footage tells the brutal truth. As you can witness, there was little compassion for the wild ones. This mare came stumbling up to the observation area, looking for her lost foal. Many other mares were separated from their foals that day. One foal lost its eye. The Coutures promised they would round up the horses at a slow pace and with compassion. As usual, the Coutures pushed the horses to their limit. As we left the crime scene that day, I could only think of the parallels of the failed Afghanistan war and the war on our wild horses, constitutional and civil rights in America.